Hello and welcome. This is Rooflemonger, my friends. Today I want to talk about a concept in Street Fighter 6 that became very apparent to me in the recent Lily vs. Honda footage, and that is the concept of buffs. So Lily and Honda both have a buff that's pretty important to their game plan, and if they can manage to get their buff off, they'll have a pretty distinct advantage going on. And it made me realize, while these characters certainly have buffs, they're far from the only characters that have it, like buffs, resources, things to worry about besides just here's my base move set, let's go. Now in Street Fighter, it's not exactly rare, but neither is it exactly common. More in, like, say, anime fighting games, you'll find things like buffs, resources to work with, all that kind of stuff. Street Fighter, not as much. Except Street Fighter 6, it's the most prevalent it's ever been. Looking here at our starting roster for Street Fighter 6, just a little bit over half the cast has something to build up, manage, or otherwise aim for. Something to do other than just hit buttons and go. So I figured in this video it'd be fun just to kinda, as a refresher, go over the characters that have additional mechanics besides just the base moveset, and go over what they do exactly. And since we already mentioned them, let's start with Lily and Honda, and then work our way through everyone else. So we went in depth in a recent video, and I'll link that at the end of this video, so not to belabor the point too much, but Lily has the Condor Wind. Every time she does the Condor Wind, she builds one wind-clad stack. That's this guy right here. You can see it underneath the health bar. And yes, she can stack multiple copies of it. And every stack you have turbocharges some of her moves. Specifically, the Condor Spire, the Condor Dive, and the Tomahawk Buster. Every time you do one of these moves, it will use up one of the stocks you have of the Windclad stock, and it turbocharges them accordingly. The Condor Spire, we know, makes the Condor Spire multi-hitting and advantage on block, so if they block it, it's still your turn, which is incredible. We don't know the specifics on the buffs of the Condor Dive and the Tomahawk Buster, but if it's anything like the buff on the Condor Spire, it is going to be truly significant. So building stocks will be a major part of her game plan. Honda's buff isn't terribly nuanced, but it is quite powerful. So he does oppose, summons the sunlight, and then he has his own buff ready. When the buff is active, you'll see this hand icon underneath his health bar. What the buff does is effectively his V skill from Street Fighter V. It turbocharges his next 100-hand slap. And it gives you much more hit advantage, and I'm assuming block advantage as well, and it lets you do things like combo after the fact. So you can get full combos from a 100-hand slap to a follow-up to, say, another 100-hand slap into super, like this example here. So it's not free necessarily, because you do have to take time to set up the buff and, summon the sunlight for you. But once it's live, your next 100-hand slap will have that additional follow-up slap at the very end. You have much more advantage, and then you can create combos that you could not create before. So while the buff is live, Honda's offensive potential goes up drastically. Now let's talk Ryu. Even basic boring old Ryu has a buff to manage in this game. That is the Denjin Charge. Now, it's actually somewhat similar to Lily's in that it powers up specific moves, although unlike Lily, he can't stack it. And like the other characters, when the Denjin buff is active, you can see it right below the health bar, a nice little icon to remind you. And while the buff is live, his new move, the Hashogeki, gets buffed up, new properties, and of course his classic Hadouken as well gets a lot stronger, multi-hit, all that kind of stuff, and then you use up the buff and you'd have to reapply it. Pretty simple stuff. Next character with a buff mechanic is Jamie. As our resident drunken boxer, well, he's all about the drinking. He can either take a swig of a drink by itself, or certain moves like this Rekka Chain will add one drink to your counter. And like so many of these other moves, once your drink counter goes up, you can see it underneath the health bar. So for Jamie, it starts at 0 and go all the way to 4. Every drink level, you get progressively stronger and stronger, both in unlocking moves, which we'll talk about in a second here, and also just literally, you actually will do more damage every drink level you are up. A Jamie with maxed out drinks does significantly more damage than a Jamie with no drinks in him. At 1 drink in, he unlocks a new move like, say, his dive kick. 2 drinks in, he'll unlock another move like his breakdancing kicks. And so on and so forth. At 3 drinks, he actually unlocks a command grab. Not quite like a Zangief pile driver kind of grab, but you get a guaranteed combo from it, so it's still pretty dangerous. So over the course of the match, you can either get guaranteed drinks in through the Rekka series, or take a risk and take a swig just in the middle of the round. The higher your level is, straight up, the better your chances of winning is. You're just a better character the more drinks you have in you. That said though, you can't take it with you. At the beginning of each new round, your drink counter will reset back to 0, so you have to build it up all over again. Now on to Manon. So Manon, like Jamie, has a steamroll mechanic, if you will. Something you build up and up and up, and you get stronger and stronger and stronger when you do it. And that is her medal level mechanic. So her medal level is directly tied to her grabs. The higher your medal level, the better your grabs get. And unlike Jamie, hers are permanent. They do last between rounds. So how do we build these up? Well, all you gotta do is land grabs. Either land your command grab, so like say Zangief, or your hit grab. The hit grab is just a grab you can do in combos. And every time you do, your medal level will permanently go up by 1. The higher the level, the more damage your grabs do, and also it unlocks all new animations as well. Like here is her basic command grab at levels 1 and 2, a simple trip. At levels 3 and 4, the same grab gets quite a bit more elaborate. Now we're throwing you up in the air and dunking you on your head, and of course doing more damage. And maxed out at level 5, we get even more elaborate yet, and the damage of course will increase, and it's speculated that at level 5 she might be doing more damage than Zangief with her grabs. So Manon's mechanic makes her a steamroller, progressively more dangerous as the match goes on. At the beginning of round 1 she's at her weakest, and the longer the match goes on and she lands more and more grabs, the scarier and scarier she will get. Now on to Juri. So Juri's always been a resource-based character since the start in her debut in Street Fighter 4, but it's always been messy. And it was messy there because it was Negative Edge, it was messy in Street Fighter 5 when they tried to change it, and it finally makes some sense here. So Juri's whole thing is Fuha stocks, and you can have up to 3 stocked at any given time in Street Fighter 6. And in Street Fighter 6, it buffs her special moves. In Street Fighter 4, if you didn't have Negative Edge charge, you couldn't use the specials. In Street Fighter 5, if you didn't have the buffs up, you couldn't use the specials. Here, you can use the specials whenever you want. They're just better if you have the stocks. So certain moves like her signature fireball, if you have a stock up, it gets empowered. And you build a stock every time you do her Fuha move, the kick, and you'll be doing that all the time in combos and in neutral and non-stop basically. It's a resource you'll be building up a lot and spending a lot. You will build it easily and burn it like candy. So it's the easiest resource to generate for a lot of these characters, and it's also the easiest to burn through. Now some characters start with a resource and then deplete it over the course of the match, like say Blanka. Blanka has his Blanka dolls, and he can toss them out, and he starts with 3 of these every round. And when they're out, he can do things like use his electricity to shock them and have them march across the screen. It's seemingly a pretty powerful mechanic, so that's why it's limited. He can only do it 3 times around. And once the next round begins, it will refresh back to 3 Blanka dolls. Kimberly, much like Blanka, also starts with a limited resource. That is her spray paint cans. And they're basically just giant grenades. Works a little bit different than Blanka. She starts with 2 at the beginning of the match, and they do not refill in between rounds. However, unlike Blanka, she can manually restock her supply while the fight is ongoing. So every time you use up both of your bombs, as long as you get a moment to breathe, you can restock them and then just keep the party going. And to close out, while it's not necessarily a buff or a resource to mention, both Guile and Luke do have just frame moves, where if you execute the move with perfect timing, your moves get better and have additional properties, do more damage, better combos, all that kind of stuff. So in the context of the game, it gives you something to aim for besides just do the move, because you are aiming to have perfect timing. And that's, I guess you could just say, an overview of it. So some characters, like say Cammy, are kind of plain Jane. They ain't there to trick you with anything fancy. They are what they are, and they're very in your face about it. Even though, say someone like Cammy, she did gain the ability to charge some of her moves, but that's just as simple as like holding down a button for an extra second. So once again, buffs and resources are not necessarily a new concept at all in Street Fighter, but Street Fighter 6 is definitely now when they have become the most prevalent. And I like that a lot. It adds a lot more depth to characters' game plans, and I like the idea of giving you additional goals to attempt to reach in the middle of a match. Like say Lily, I will forego pressuring you now to build up wind-clad stocks so I can be much more annoying down the road. Or say Honda, normally any character really, is under no specific pressure to try to rush Honda down and just let him not breathe. But if you know if you're going to be slow, he's going to try to attempt to build that buff, and then all of a sudden the next 100 hand slap is going to be extra dangerous, maybe now you're much more inclined to go at him and make sure that he doesn't have the chance to build that buff. So it can inform gameplay on the matches themselves, on top of just fun extra layers of depth. And all that said, I would love to know what you guys think about it. So post your thoughts on all this in the comments below. Do you like it? Is it too complex for you? Maybe it's just right. Let me know. And otherwise, well, I guess we're at the end of the video. So thank you very much for watching. Hope this video has found you well, and go out and play some Street Fighter.